Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host, and today we're going to be talking about the single most viral chocolate phenomenon in the past couple of years, which is Dubai chocolate. What is Dubai chocolate? What makes it special, and why? And then what we're going to be talking about is the future, Dubai Chocolate 2.0. Now, you may not be interested in making Dubai chocolate and jumping onto a viral trend, which may be nearing the end of its life, maybe, maybe not. And so you're thinking, what can I do as a confectioner? What can I do, right, to do something which builds upon the lessons that are associated with Dubai chocolate? What is Dubai chocolate? What makes it special? Why are people so interested in it? What can you replicate and what can't you replicate, right, which is an important consideration in this topic. And then what I want to go through is also use this as a lesson on how to use a large language model, an AI like ChatGPT, but not necessarily ChatGPT, to help you in your explorations in new product development, in many other things. But just how would you think about using an LLM, going into ChatGPT? How would you create your prompts, and what you might be looking for to help you be a better user of that technology? Before we do that, I want to point out that this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, is sponsored by the members of The Chocolate Life. If you're not a member of The Chocolate Life, you can go to TheChocolateLife.com. You can click on the green join button up here in the upper right. I'm logged in, so it says account, but if you're not, you'll be asked to sign in to create an account, register. There are free memberships. There are premium memberships. I'm not doing Patreon, not doing advertising. What you can do is you can join The Chocolate Life for free. But if you like the work we do and want to support it, then there are premium memberships, some of which include coaching and consulting hours at a discount. So really appreciate all that. And of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, give the like, subscribe, the bells, all the things, share, comment with the algorithm, all the things that help. And so with that, what I want to do is I want to jump over to The Chocolate Life right now and point out that for this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode, what I've done is I've created a post on The Chocolate Life. And you can go there. You don't have to follow along with URLs or anything like that. They're all here in the post, and you can follow along during the episode. It's a run of show. It'll tell you what it is that I'm going to talk about, or you can return to it afterwards. And if you are a member, you can continue the conversation with the member discussion at the bottom of every single page. So that'll really help out to do that. So I want to talk about Dubai chocolate. Why do I want to talk about Dubai chocolate? And the reason I want to talk about it is because it is probably the single most visible new chocolate product introduction certainly in the last 5 years, although it was not introduced, depending on which sources you're looking to, in 2021 or 2022. Even though it is fairly recent, I can't think of a product which has had legitimate ground level grassroots interest and attention paid to it ever. Now, you'll have a big company like Barry Callebaut that puts millions of dollars into a new product launch by Ruby, like Ruby, right? But when you think about how Dubai chocolate came to be and how it came to prominence, there was no single company that was promoting it. And so it went viral. But before we do that, let's go take a look at seeing what we can find. And I've got some information which is on the post here, which I've shown you, but I want to show you where I got it. Right? And one of the things that you're going to want to know about is an LLM. And if you go into the comments and you make a comments, this is a new browser called Dia. And Dia is built by the browser company, which uses the other browser that I use, which is called Arc. And one of the things about Dia is that it is designed from the beginning to interact with large language models. So what happens is if I've got, for example, a page, for example, here, this list of place names on Wikipedia. So here's a page in Wikipedia. One of the things that I can do is there's a little chat button on the upper right. And what I can do is I can open up a window and I can start inquiring using an LLM, in this case, ChatGPT 4.1 or 5. What I can do is I can ask questions. And Dia knows that I'm asking questions about the page right next door. So I don't have to go to a page, copy the URL into ChatGPT, and lose the context. And for me, that's really, really important. And one of the things I wanted to know, right, and I posted this in, or I copied some of this information into my post, is I wanted to think about Dubai chocolate. Are there any confections, right, based on place names that have had the same, that have that are globally famous? Is there a place name that is globally famous when it comes to a confection? Now, off the top of my head, I could think of Turkish Delight. I could think of Jordan almonds. What others were there? And it turns out that having a confection which is tied to a specific place, which is within a particular food culture, Dubai chocolate is maybe unique in the history of confections. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you one of the reasons why I like to use Dia. The other reason why I like to use Dia is they have these things called skills. And what I can do is I can type a slash and I can say, explain. And what it will do, right? You can't see it because it's hidden here, but I typed the word explain down here. I don't have an easy way. Oh, you know what? Let me go and do this, right? So I'm hiding this. I've got the word explain, and I can just go explain and press return. Well, it knows that I'm talking about this page on my left, and it remembers its earlier response. And what it will do is you'll see it's going through the chat GPT thinking here, right? And it gives me the context. And this is one of the reasons why I like to use this product. They're not sponsoring this episode, so don't worry about that. I don't get anything for doing this. I'm just telling you why I like it. Now, if you want to go into the comments and say, hey, Clay, please, what I'd like is an invite to try Dia. We can figure out a way to do a back channel private communication, perhaps on LinkedIn, perhaps on Facebook, perhaps on YouTube. And what I can do is I can send you an invite link if you're interested in trying out this browser. It's one of two browsers I use every day. And I wanted to share that with you. So here we are. So I asked the question very, very simply, what is Dubai chocolate? And this is a hint that I want to share with you about how to use LLMs completely and responsibly, which is the question you ask is going to determine what the answer is. So believe it or not, I asked the question, what is Dubai chocolate? And it told me what it is, a little bit of editorializing. It knows that it's a viral chocolate bar. It comes from Dubai. It's got a pistachio tahini cream with a crunchy Catis pastry called Knafeh. And it gives me a little bit of history about it. But I asked a separate question in the separate browsers is what is Dubai chocolate and why did it go viral? And what I got was a different answer, right? Which is perhaps to be expected, but it does highlight the fact that what you ask and how you ask it is going to have a huge factor on how the LLM responds to your question. And I just want to point this out. I asked it, why did it go viral? So it shortened the what is. It's a pistachio and Knafeh filled chocolate bar, right? That went viral due to its unique flavor, social media hype, and limited availability. But one of the things that I want to show you here is that it says 2022 as to when it was introduced, and it gave me the official name of it. Can't get Knafeh of it, which is a lovely pun. I love that. But if I go back to the other one, it says it was introduced in 2021, who it was created by. It doesn't tell me the name of the company that they worked for. And so it's really quite interesting that by slightly changing the question, what I did was I got different answers. And the different answers, part of the information was complementary, and some of it was confusing. Was it introduced in 2021 or was it introduced in 2022? And so I was able to offer a follow-up question. I don't believe it was in this chat, but it might have been. I've asked it, was it 2021 or 2022? So that's one of the things that was really interesting to me, is that by asking the question in two different ways, I got two slightly different answers. There was some complementary information. There was some confusing information. I don't know that it was contradictory information, but what that did is it said, I need to do some further question asking. And so I did that. So really, really important to go and do that. So just to know. So then I was able, what is Dubai chocolate? It gave me this interesting thing. It gave me a list of key ingredients. They talked about how it's made. They talked about why it's popular. and things like that. So why is it popular? And this is important. So why am I talking? So what is the other reason why I'm going through? Why am I talking about Dubai chocolate? Hey Clay, this is the Chocolate Life. This is Pod Safe Chocolate. But one of the themes that has been a part of many of the episodes over the course of the last year is how do you produce products which have less expensive cost of goods? So can we reduce the amount of cocoa by replacing it with other ingredients? And it turns out that even though Dubai chocolate has created a craze wherein the price of pistachios has increased maybe as great as the price, maybe as much as the price of cocoa, the idea of replacing a lot of chocolate with a nut and seed paste, so tahini is sesame seed paste, by replacing very expensive chocolate with less expensive ingredients, the phyllo dough, the Knafeh, is might be comparatively inexpensive when it comes to cocoa. It does add an allergen, so nuts and seeds and pastry do add allergen aspects to it that need to be considered. But in part, what you've got is you've got a bar which has less expensive ingredients, and yet the demand for it, the price of it, is high enough so that you can legitimately charge more for a bar than you could for a just a straight solid chocolate bar, which is an interesting phenomenon. So think about that, right? So the impetus here, and this is something that I do cover to some extent in the post for today, where I go through and say, what is the brief, right? So why are we talking about this? Cocoa remains expensive. The price is volatile. What we're doing is that makers need to protect margins without eroding consumer trust. And what are the elements that might contribute to eroding consumer trust? That might be replacing real chocolate with a compound. That might be replacing a specialty chocolate with an industrial chocolate. That might mean, any using artificial flavors of certain kinds rather than natural flavorings. All sorts of things could be done that might, when consumers look at your bar, they might go, this is not a good thing, or it's not as good as I remember, or it's not as good as I want it to be. So what are we something to do? We're looking at trends, which we talked about in the news and AMA episode. What are people looking at? Functional benefits, luxury indulgence, premiumization and virtual flair, and bold and global flavor innovation. And that's one of the things that Dubai chocolate, quote unquote, Dubai chocolate leverage. It is considered to be a luxury indulgence. There is premiumization and visual flair, and what there's also it is bold and global flavor innovation. And when you're thinking about what is your version of Dubai Chocolate 2.0 brought out by you, right? These are things that you want to talk about. I mean, it's hard to imagine, well, could I do a functional benefit with this? I don't know the answer to that question, but okay. But what you want to do is you want to leverage the Dubai Chocolate moment as a platform for limited run, premium, visually arresting, filled bars that minimize cocoa mass per unit and wrap in functional and festive variants to justify higher prices. This is what we're doing here. This is what we're doing here, right? This is the brief. And this might be something that you'd put together for any new product development. What is the state of the market? Why are you doing this? What demand, what trends are you responding to? So think about that. So number 2, the product strategy, right? So one aspect of this is we want to maximize the perceived value of the products we're producing per gram of cocoa or per gram of chocolate in the finished product. So you want an architecture, it's a filled product that reduces the net chocolate usage. You could set a goal. We want to reduce cocoa mass by 20 to 40%. We've got thin, high snap shells, wafer and gianduja stratification. We want to do layers. We want something that when you do the cross section, you've got something which is visually interesting. But let's stop there if we can, because one of the things which I found to be really interesting when I went searching for this is Adobe stock. I'm a photographer by training. I try to use a lot of my own imagery, but this is the Adobe stock website. And I was just looking for images that I could use for the hero image for the post, and I found one. But if you look at this, what you see here is that there is a wide variety of visual presentations for what Dubai chocolate is. There are some very thick bars. The cross sections here are emphasized. What we see is the layer here of pistachio. I mean, here, what we're seeing is, let me see if I can make this big. Ah, the layer here is not all that thick. It seems like there's a lot of chocolate. In terms that I would think of from confectionery, it looks a little horsey in terms of the proportions. It's a term from I learned from typography. You've got that. What are some other things? Here are bars. You know, this bar looks very, very thin, right? Certainly thinner than many of the other bars that we've looked like. Here's one that looks like it has, in addition to the Knafeh, it's got whole pistachios in it. Not a bad idea, right? Might be expensive. What are some other ones that you got here? But when you've got the Dubai chocolate, you have a bunch of different cross sections and bunch of different things you can add. And it turns out, excuse me, that if you look at this, there's no layer stratification here. There's just the chocolate and then the filling, right? So and then that's it, right? And so are there opportunities to do something that's more visually interesting when you cut across the cross section? Now, if we're going to do that, we need a thicker bar. That's not surprising, but the visual presentation is quite interesting, I think, to consider. I mean, this is very simple. It's very, very plain. This is, I don't know how much of this is just bad photography because this is dirty, fingerprints and things like that. I don't know the answer to that question. This is a little bit more interesting in terms of the presentation, but it's very, very, very simple in terms of what's going on. And interestingly, I don't see any of them. I mean, this might be the Knafeh in the back here, but when we're looking at the way this is presented, right, we're looking at simple decorations of the chocolate in the mold, but we're not doing something that confectioners can do, which is multi-layered products. That doesn't seem to be a part of it, right? But what we've got and what people are responding to when they're thinking about what Dubai chocolate is they're thinking about they're thinking about the not just the visual appeal and not just the break in the cross section, but what you've got is a very, very luxurious eating experience. So you're biting through the chocolate and you've got this initial resistance to the bite, which is happening because of the chocolate. And you probably have got the smell of chocolate in your nose and the smell of chocolate on your tongue, or the taste of chocolate on your tongue. And as you bite it, you're getting the richness of the pistachio tahini. And you've got the softness and unctuousness. If you're using more tahini and to make something which is softer, and then you've got the crunch, right? You've got the crispiness. And so you've got a bunch of different textural elements in addition to the taste elements. And that is delivering a premium luxury mouthfeel and eating experience. And we can't overlook that, or you shouldn't overlook that when you think about formulations. One of the lessons that I learned a long time ago working during the World Pastry Forum and the World Pastry Team Championships is that what you want to do is you want to complement in flavor and contrast in texture. Right? So you're gonna find ingredients that go well together when it comes to the flavor component, and then add something crispy, crunchy, some other element which is going to provide fun. Right? It might be unexpected, but it's going to provide a more complex, not necessarily complicated, but a more complex eating experience. Right? So if we think about that, for some reason, I've asked the LLM not to give me British spellings, but it keeps giving me. I've said specifically, give me U.S. spellings, American spellings. But so it says you have this. So one thing you might want to do when you talk about wafer and gianduja stratification, right, which we talked about, luxurious bite, right, is you've got a classic pistachio and tahini bar. Right? But what you might do is you might do a dark sesame pistachio halva bar, and making halva is really easy. Involves pouring hot sugar syrup into sesame paste and beating it and whipping air into it. It's really easy to do. You might make a white or blonde baklava bar or a matcha pistachio variant for Asian forward markets. So that what you might do is create a lineup. Don't think of a replacement, but think of, oh, can I do a suite of flavors that build on the Dubai concept, right? But deliver flavors according to different cultural profiles, right? And I got to say, this is an edited cut and paste from the results of a Chat GPT prompt, right? I did take this, I did edit it, but I mean, I am working from the results of the Chat GPT prompt. And I'm sharing them with you because I want to show you that you can use LLMs as inspiration tools. And one thing to consider, and I do suggest that you think about doing this, is that most people sort of default to ChatGPT because it's what they know. But what you might do is you might, if you have a Google account that gives you access to Gemini, do exactly the same prompt in Gemini, and then do exactly the same prompt in Mistral, and then do exactly the same prompt in Claude, right? Because they use different algorithms, because the corpus of text that they're working from are not, the corpora of text that they're working from are not identical, you will get different answers, right? And you can take, for example, you might take, cut and paste the output of one LLM and use it as input for another prompt in another LLM. So don't think that, one LLM, ChatGPT, is the only way to go. And I regularly use 4 different LLMs, and I will ask the same question across all 4 of them to see how the answers differ. But I just wanted to say that it came up with the idea of, you wouldn't call it a Dubai chocolate lineup, right? I don't necessarily know. I'm not going to give anybody any ideas for names here, right? Although the LLM suggested 2. But that you think about perhaps doing your own riff on the classic Dubai chocolate flavor combination and texture combination, and then do variations on it. And now what you can do is you can sell collections. You can sell them as sets, right? It also suggested that in addition to full-size bars, you create what they call mini batons, which I would say just small bars, and tiles, which would be bonbons of some sort, right? So that you make 3 different sizes of the product. And this is going to be easier for some recipes and some formulations for other. That would really be interesting. You could create a product which has the same thing but has got a lower introductory price, so somebody doesn't feel like they have to spend $20 or more on a 100-gram bar to figure out if they like it or not. They might be able to buy something which is in the $5 to $7 range, get a sense for what it is, and then upgrade themselves to a much more expensive product. Or you might have this in bonbon format where people could buy a selection of 4 or 8 or 12, right? So that they can share with friends as part of the tasting exercise. So think about that. It says functional twists. I am not necessarily certain that going functional with a Dubai style chocolate product is necessarily the way I go, but right, it would, but I think that the notion of clean label is a really good idea. If you want to make sure that you're not eroding trust with your customers, that what you're doing is you're delivering something that has a clean label on it. And then what you can do is you can do seasonal additions. So you might do something which is associated with Halloween. You might do something that's associated with some other holiday. And if I was, gold leaf pistachio as opposed to midnight pistachio, these are sort of naming concepts which are tied to holidays. And I think that naming concepts which are tied to holidays, which might have, for example, if I were to do a bar, let me go like this. If I were to do a bar that was decorated like this one, right? Maybe what I might do is, you see the colored decorations that are in here? Maybe I do that as pumpkin spice. So a pumpkin spice flavored white chocolate. And it could take me from Halloween through into Thanksgiving here in the United States. So this visual decoration, right, also offers an opportunity to provide taste variation and exploration. So just a thought, but thinking about those things is one way to go and work through this, right? So as part of the brief and the product strategy, right, what we're doing is we've got flavor variations, we've got size variations, we've got seasonal additions that we can put together. We can use nuts and seeds and pastry and other ingredients to reduce the cost of the chocolate in the products, right? So when it comes to format and positioning, we also talked about clean label sustainability claims, perhaps a 50-gram bar is the core, 30-gram minis, and then 12 to 15-gram bonbons, right? Gift boxes of assorted minis and seasonal variations. So this is our product strategy. It's really, really good. Again, from the entry level, you might do the minis at $4 to $6, the bonbons at $3, the 50-gram bars at $8 to $12. And then if you're doing hand decorated seasonal stuff, you might be able to price them in the range of $18 to $30. So this is the brief and the product strategy, which is going to be able to deliver on a coherent product line. And that's something to consider, right? So what I haven't talked about, and I do want to talk about right now, is one of the things that you don't have control over at all, is the reason why Dubai chocolate went viral. And it is one of these things that somebody went to Dubai, they bought this bar in the only place where you could buy it. So there's very limited availability. It was only available in one place, right? And not only was it only available in one place, but they never made more than a certain number of bars per day. So you not only had to go to this one place in the United Arab Emirates, you needed to get there early enough in the day that they hadn't sold out, right? So that's limited availability. It created demand and FOMO, fear of missing out. So those things were in place already. And some TikTok influencer got the bar and put a video about the bar up on TikTok, and bang, over 100 million views. And that 100 million views, I don't know over what period of time, but who could have predicted, right, that this would happen? You can't predict that this will happen. But what did happen is that viral component, which further drove up demand because it was only available in one place and there was only a limited edition. So one of the things that you can take from this is this LTO part, this limited time offer. I'm only making 100 of them, and per day. If you have a retail location, I'm selling them only out of this retail location. They're only 50 a day, and you have to come and pick them up. That worked really, really well for Dominique Ansel when he introduced the cronut. I was living in Manhattan at the time. No, I wasn't. I was living up in Westchester, but I may have been living in New York City at the time. But lines formed outside of that shop, right? The Dominique Ansel boutique. Lines formed in the morning, very, very long. They only made so many. And if you wanted to get a cronut, you needed to be there early in the day. So think about, again, if you have a retail location, what you can do to drive that kind of excitement about what you're doing, right? And they have to do with limited availability in terms of location and the number of things that you're making. I know a really successful business which is located in Kortrijk in Belgium, similar kind of thing. Right? They're only open for retail business, I believe, 4 days a week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They use the days that they're not open, take Sunday off, but they use Monday and Tuesday for production. But for example, I think they only sell croissants on Saturday and Sunday, and they make something like 100 of them. And so if you want to have one of their croissants, you need to get there first thing in the morning in order to do this. They do similar kinds of things. They make their ice creams in-house. They make gelatos in-house. They make their own bonbon in-house. And many of them are only available, like we make 100 of them and they're gone. Right? So think about that in terms of what you're doing. And that limited availability on both those components will drive demand and FOMO, which may lead to some influencer doing you a favor and putting you up on in their TikTok or Instagram or some other feed, and then drive virality, which is going to further increase demand. So that is the feedback loop that you're looking for. You don't necessarily control it. I don't know that the owners of Fixed Desserts in Dubai were thinking about this when they created it. They were looking at their regional food history, right, and making something that made sense in the context of the cuisine that they knew and was common to them, right? Right. So how do you go about doing that? So number one is let's go take some of these recipe ideas that were put together, and these are all recommended by ChatGPT. I'm using, I think, 4.1 as the version which is doing this. So one way to think about this, okay, so just a quick note, all of the following recipes are designed to be layered or filled. So you get flavors and textures while keeping the chocolate shell, whether it's a bonbon shell or whether it's within a mold, thin. Right? The recipe ideas invite storytelling. So tell me about the cuisines, tell me about the flavors, right? Around their ingredients and origins. And you should look at the storytelling ideas as starting points for your own creative endeavors, right? So and adapting them to your market and your customers. The fact that it's Dubai chocolate is an indicator that if they had created this exact same recipe in Skokie, Illinois, it would not have taken off, right? It could have been the exact same product, right, with the exact same ingredients, but if it wasn't done in Dubai, in the UAE, it would not have happened. The other thing to consider is that if we look at the story here, the original name for this was called I Can't Get Knafeh of It, right? So Knafeh is the reference to the pastry. I can't get enough of it. It's a pun, right? This would never have gone viral if the person who was responsible for putting this up on TikTok didn't also, or the small group of people who originally launched the virality didn't rename it to something simpler, Dubai chocolate, right? Much, much easier to say Dubai chocolate than can't get Knafeh of it. Really, really important. So what did drive the acceptance? Number one, social media, right? Late 2023, a year or more after its introduction, which said, this ain't going viral. I mean, it was just, I mean, it may have been interesting within the context of Dubai, but it didn't become a global phenomenon until a TikTok influencer over a year after its introduction caused it to go viral. Limited availability, we've talked about. FOMO drove demand, inspiring imitators, right? From small artisan confectioners to global brands, such as Lindt, to imitate as imitators do. And that's one of the reasons why I showed you the images of the cross sections. You have what the original cross section is, but if you were to go into your local store and get the Lindt bar and you break it open, the cross section is incredibly disappointing. And the thinness of the bar, which is part of the Lindt brand, that particular mold that they use, it's disappointing as well. I can imagine that the taste experience of the Lindt bar, which I haven't had, just from a texture and biting experience, is going to be nothing compared to what something which is 3 to 4 times as thick as that bar is, right? Right. And as I pointed out, the demand for Dubai chocolate has been so great that the price of pistachios is just ridiculous. So the third thing that this did, social media, limited availability, is the tasting experience, right? So there is the textural experience of the crisp in the chocolate, the slight bitterness of the chocolate, the almost too sweet sweetness of the pistachio cream, which has got the tahini in it. Now, one of the ways you can mediate that is there are different roast levels of the tahini. So you might get something which is darker and more bitter and something lighter, which is creamier. You could incorporate a sweetener. You could salt it. There are many things you can do to influence the taste of the filling that you're working with. And then the crispness of the pastry that's in it, a phyllo pastry that's in it. And then I talked about the naming, right? So all of those 4 things had to come together in order to make Dubai chocolate go viral. But let's go back and think about some of the recipes. So one way to think about this is to think about recipes that are inspired by country-specific cuisines. And this goes back to the idea of putting together a flight of different Dubai chocolate-inspired products. So we might think about Thailand as an inspiration. So we might use a coconut cream ganache with toasted rice and roasted peanuts. Those are things that we would find in Thai cuisine. We could think about flavoring with kaffir lime, maybe a bit of lemongrass, candied ginger. If we wanted to put something, if we wanted to do a textural component which is different from roasted peanuts with very finely chopped, as you'll find in many, many Thai dishes, um, crispy puffed rice or coconut chips. And then what you might do visually is pandan or a sprinkle of sesame seeds on top. What I might do is I might decorate the bar, right, using a pandan flavored white chocolate swirl in the bar. That would be a great way to introduce that flavor if you didn't want to do it. But what we've got here is, think about using a Thai origin chocolate, number one, to talk to a Thai inspired cuisine using lime, kaffir lime, lemongrass, which are all parts of Thai cuisine, peanuts, candied ginger, coconut. You get the idea that what we're doing, and don't think about specifically, right? Don't you again use these recipes as starting points. How would I layer this if I'm going to layer this, right? Or am I going to try to put everything all in one center? And so you could do a milk chocolate in the mold and then bottom it with dark chocolate. You don't need to use the same chocolate on both sides. If you want to do a vegan chocolate, you could do a coconut milk chocolate and emphasize the coconut flavor. Lots of ways to go about doing this. What you want is something which has got enough thickness so that you can get the bite of the chocolate, perhaps a little bit of bitterness associated with chocolate to offset the sweetness of the ingredients. You've got the unctuous richness of the cream. It could be a ganache or the nut paste, or it could be a nut paste in a ganache. No reason not to play with those things. And then the crispy element, whatever that is going to be. So this is Thailand, right? So use this as a point of departure for what it is that goes on. The same thing, right, using 5 different elements here, might be, if we were to think of India as a source for the inspiration for what it is that I'm doing, again, using an Indian origin dark chocolate or perhaps a masala chai spiced milk chocolate, or you could use a dark chocolate and decorate it with a masala chai spiced milk or white chocolate, right? We want that visual appeal, right? And that's one way to go about doing it. And when I say decorating the bar, right, with a chocolate, I'm talking about doing something like this, right? Not strewing pistachios on it, but looking at decorating the mold before I fill it and empty it out to create the shell. So that's what I'm talking about there, right? So a saffron cardamom pistachio cream, that sounds good. They don't use a lot of sesame paste in Indian cooking. That doesn't mean you couldn't use it. There's a lot of rose petal, which is a rose jam. You don't need to use pistachio. I'm trying to think of, when I think about Indian cuisines, I often think about cashews. So maybe a cashew paste, which is folded into the ganache, which is folded. So again, or chopped cashews, right, with a black pepper or fennel. Another thing you might do is, could we take the masala chai kind of idea and use the other spices which are associated with the chai blend, or masala chai or chai tea? All right, you've got that kind of flavor component to work with. A crushed almond brittle would be interesting, although again, I think of more of cashews when I think of Indian cuisine. So go there. And then dried rose petals as an interesting decoration would be an interesting idea. When we think about Mexican influence, again, try to use a Mexican origin chocolate. Cinnamon is very, very common in Mexican chocolate, so might think about using that. So they've got a dulce de leche or cajeta, which is a goat's milk version of dulce de leche. I believe it actually originated in Argentina, but dulce de leche, cajeta is a very, very common flavor with roasted pecans. Again, there aren't nuts and seeds associated with this, but if I'm doing this is a caramel, right? So the question is, how firm is the caramel? In this particular case, I don't think for this particular product, you don't want an ooey gooey caramel. You want that flavor incorporated as something which is much firmer. So I would add the dulce de leche or the cajeta to some sort of nut paste. Now, if we're thinking about traditional Oaxacan drinking hot chocolate, almonds are very, very common in there. And if we think about mole poblano, which is from Puebla, a common ingredient is sesame seeds. So we do have historical context, even if it's post-Hispanic conquest. There is historical context in Mexican cuisine for using almonds and sesame seeds in this. But if you think about a mole recipe, it often has a toasted corn tortilla and used as a thickener. So if we think of a drink like pozol or champurrado, using corn flour or a very, very finely ground masa might be something else that can be done to provide thickness. So play with those ideas to deliver the kind of texture that people are looking for. It's got toasted pepitas, pumpkin seeds, again, very, very traditional, red chili threads, or cocoa nibs on top. The cocoa nibs could be scattered into the mold before it's filled with the before it's filled with a cream center. There's no ingredient which is similar to the pastry, right? The Knafeh, the phyllo pastry, and it's not a part of Mexican cuisine, so I don't know that I would use it. Maybe if we're Indian cuisine, maybe I would go, ooh, man, could I think about incorporating a papadum shreds into this, or shards of papadum in this? That might be interesting, assuming, yeah, that would be interesting to think about. I can do. You want something which is mostly nut paste and not water, because you don't want the papadum absorbing the water and getting soggy. But it's an interesting idea of this is an element which is associated with Indian cuisine that I could use. Excuse me, and I'm riffing here. I mean, I was looking at this yesterday so I could copy them into this table format, and I was thinking about it, and I'm looking at them this morning, and I've got all these new ideas. Like, poop, things are popping into my brain in terms of Mexican stuff. So the Tabasco is the Tabasco chili is a native chili to Mexico. If I wanted to add something with a very small hint of spice, I might do that. If I wanted it smoky, I could do a chipotle, which is a mesquite smoked jalapeno, typical of the cuisine. I hope you're getting the idea that these are points of inspiration. So it's a basic idea. I'm putting it out there on the internet. Anybody can use it. But what I'm doing is I'm saying, you go do you. How am I going to go do this? So how would we do something which is Peruvian? Again, we're going to use a Peruvian origin chocolate. We might use a lucuma cream, which is a native fruit. It's often used as a sweetener, lucuma as a sugar. Very, very typical to use with castanha do Pará, as I would call it in Brazil, or Brazil nuts, right? As the nut for the paste. You could use candied purple corn. Cacao nibs is a crunchy element. Purple corn it's used for making lots of drinks, and things like that. Is very, very common in Peruvian cuisine. And then maybe do a very finely ground purple corn powder. Oh, interesting. So if you had a lot of liquid in your center, maybe coloring it purple, that purple color which would be naturally occurring from the purple corn. Actually, if you're making a ganache, right, from the lucuma cream, what you could do is you could take the purple corn powder, infuse the flavor and the color of the purple corn in the liquid used to make the ganache. That would be interesting, because you got this really, really wonderful purple color and this earthy base that comes from the corn. I mean, I'm just imagining in my mind what I would think about that. And there's nothing really in Peruvian cuisine that I can think of which talks about the texture that's associated with the phyllo dough. So you need to introduce that in another way. You're not going to get it by doing bits of Brazil nuts. They're soft. They're not going to be crunchy. I would roast the Brazil nuts fairly heavily, and to be able to have them stand out as a flavor in this. If I'm doing this as French inspired, which I think is pretty cool, a thin shell. We're talking about as thin as you can make it, shatteringly thin. But this I thought was interesting. Savory goat cheese blended with creme fraiche and honey and sea salt as the filling, right? So you want to make it fairly thick, so you want it mainly to be the goat cheese thickness, a little creme fraiche to thin it out. I'm not entirely sure if I needed to get more density out of it. I'm not entirely sure how I would do that. So heavier texture, I don't know what added. We could do lemon zest, thyme to balance the richness of the goat cheese. But there's a lot of goat cheese. I'm thinking particularly of one called Fleur Vert, so green flour, which uses tarragon and pink peppercorn. I mean, oh my gosh, that would be really, really amazing, I think, to do here, to do this. They've got this one, roasted Marcona almonds folded into the cheese layer, or you could use feuilletine for the for a shattery buttery texture. I think that would be a really good idea. I might do both Marcona almonds and feuilletine, then using poppy seeds on the top of it. So again, what you're looking for is this rich bite and chew, right? Sort of, and maybe if it splooges into your mouth, just as it shatters and it just fills your mouth, right? It would be a really, really good idea. Something like this probably has to be put into a refrigerated case because of the short shelf life and the dairy component of it. But I think that would be a really, really interesting idea to think about it. And if you have the right kind of press, you can certainly make your own feuilletine. If you're the right kind of grill top, you can make your own feuilletine. What would I use? I'd use a crepe maker. Put the feuilletine batter very, very thin on the crepe maker, cook it up, and you could get it. It's really, really thin to do that. The other thing you might want to do, and this is something that I know somebody else has done, is get some croissant. Slice them up, shred them very, very thinly, and then toast them. And so you can use a croissant as opposed to a pain au chocolat. There might be some other layered or laminated dough which you could use as a part of this. We're in France. There are all kinds of capabilities. There's a Pan-Asian one here, which I thought was interesting, using ube, right, and a coconut, ube and coconut and feuilletine. So I've got the shell, I've got the filling, I've got accent here, the feuilletine, right? Interesting way to think about doing it. But ube, this is a thing that people respond to the fact that the filling in the Dubai bar is green. And what you might want to consider that, we have ube, which is purple, right? And we've got the purple corn. Now, what you've got is not only different flavors, but different colors, right? And I think that's a really, really interesting thing to deliver some. So I remember when I was at the Midwest Craft Chocolate Festival last year, this company out of Chicago, Chocks and Boxes, has a farm in the Philippines, and they do an ube white chocolate bar. And texturally, it was amazing, and the color was amazing, and the flavor was amazing. I love ube. If ube powder is not stupidly expensive, but it's got this great color component. And think about how you might use that. Again, what you might do is rather than using a dark chocolate shell, maybe use an ube white chocolate shell, right? Just it looks different, right? And maybe something which has got a brighter yellow interior, right? Or bright white because you got coconut cream. Lots of ways to go about thinking about that and incorporating ube. And you should go get yourself a packet of ube powder. Now, look very, very closely. You want powdered ube, not ube drink powder. Ube drink powder the number one ingredient will be sugar. It'll have dairy ingredients. It'll have mono and diglycerides and all sorts of stabilizers and things like that. Stay away from that, but go with ube powder. And it turns out that you can buy a couple of ounces of it on the Bezos store, but you can as a wholesale customer, you'll be able to find a source where ube is relatively inexpensive. And it might also have functional claims. I would go take a look at purple potatoes and see what makes sense in terms of that. I'm a huge fan of pastéis de nata or pastel de nata, which is the Portuguese national pastry, if you want to call it that. Although there's an Azorian version, which is quite different, uses a different dough. So it's quite different. I learned that because there's a Portuguese Azorian bakery here in small town Arizona where I am. And I said, oh, those look like pescetunata, and they were very, very different, very, very good, but very, very different. So, but think about a layer of dark chocolate, just enough to hold things together, but used a caramelized egg custard, right? Think about a creme brulee, or think about a flan, right? And what you're going to do is you're going to take that and you're going to run it through a stick blender, and you're going to create something which is pipeable. Or what you might do is you can get freeze-dried whole egg powder, and you could add that to a chocolate caramel, which is then thickened with something else, because again, this might be something you refrigerate and sell it fresh, right? And you put it in your mouth and it shatters, right? So it's a different experience from the traditional Dubai style nut paste, right? Classic French custard base, caramelize the sugar, blend it until silky. There's lots of things that you could do. You could add some citrus zest to it. You could decorate it with a finishing salt, maybe an Azorian or Portuguese finishing salt to keep it there. Lots of interesting things. What I would do, because a traditional pasta uses, I believe, a phyllo dough for the crust, at least if you get one that's handmade by an artisan. You could use phyllo for the crispness, although I think that feuilletine, which may be easier to get or easier to make, certainly much easier to make if you have a crepe maker, would be something to do. Make your own, right? Anyway, so it's just inspired by cuisines, right? And you've got half a dozen different ideas. You can introduce them on a seasonal basis. If you've got a diaspora expat community in the town where you live, you can do something which is aimed at them. Or there are lots of ways to go about thinking about doing this. Again, what I'm here is I've asked a question about Dubai chocolate, and then I have another prompt which says, oh, imagine I'm a business consultant. How would you go about talking to a client about using the idea of Dubai chocolate to expand their product line? And then, give me some ideas for recipe variations. So I'm using the output of one prompt as the input for another prompt, and then the output of that prompt is the input for another prompt. And then I can take the same set of prompts and then use them across multiple LLMs to come up with different ideas. It's really quick. I could do research like this and get it done, inside a half an hour. And so when you think about ideation for new product development, the LLMs, I think, are really good ideas, especially if you can be very, very focused and give the LLM as input a model that can be used to work from. Right? And then be careful to don't accept what they give you at face value, to go through and run it again if you think there's something that might be inconsistent or not quite true. You have to fact check the LLMs. And I do that in part by having an LLM fact check another LLM, although I do have a prompt that I use inside IDEA, which is just fact check. Right? And so if there's a claim, I'll just say fact check it, and the LLM will go do what it is that I want it to do. So really interesting. These so far have been inspired by cuisines, and now I've got some here which are inspired by ingredients. So how would I do this if I wanted to do something which is date forward? I live in Arizona. They grow fabulous dates here. They also do pine nuts, which is interesting. And so could I do a pine nut and date paste something? Absolutely yes. What would I use for the crunchy component? Pine nuts, you're never going to get them crunchy, I don't think. But there's a New Mexican cookie called the bizcochito. And maybe I could do a very, very thin and crispy bizcochito something, which is in here. So that would be something to do, something which is date forward. Pecans are native to the Americas. And so I can get pecans which are grown in the United States. And even though they are expensive, they might now be cheaper than pistachios. And I don't have to import them. So that's something to consider, is doing something which is pecan forward, right? So you might do a smooth a ganache with roasted pecans, or pecan praline. That would probably how I would do it. I'd do a pecan praline. I might do a praline l'ancienne. So I'd caramelize the pecans and then refine it, but not totally refine it. So I still get a crunch from the sugar. I could mix it with some salted butter caramel. Yum, yum, yum. Who doesn't love salted butter caramel? You get the idea. Maybe I'm using a pecan brittle for the base as the step when I'm layering it. So think about the cross section. As you cut this open, what does it look like from a cross section? Or if you're doing a bar which has break lines, break it in half and examine the cross section. Because this is one of the first ways people are going to explore what you're doing, right? In the middle. And it's an aspect of the visual component that's really going to appeal to people. So for some reason, I have pecans in there twice. I will have to go and edit this and take that second one out. We do have pine nuts, right, as the opponent. Maybe you're in a place where bourbon works for you. There's a baklava version. So these are around ingredients, right? In addition to cuisines. And so I've got, what is this? About a dozen ideas, which are starting points that you can use to do your own version of a Dubai chocolate. Dubai chocolate 2.0, which is what I wanted to talk about that. So while you can make the product, what you are not in control of is the virality of it. But you can take a look. So for example, if I was in Georgia, I think the pecans make sense in Georgia, but also peaches maybe. How would I do something with peaches? If I was in New York, maybe I could do something with matzah, right? It makes sense. California, obviously almonds, but what are the things going on? What can you use which is local, which makes sense for you? And then think very carefully about the name. It doesn't necessarily have to be a place name like Dubai chocolate, right? But what you want something that rolls off the tongue. And this is where an LLM can also be helpful. 47 naming ideas for a product which has got this based on X and Y and Z, right? And it will come up with lots of different names, and then you can use the output of that as input for another prompt. Tell me more about this. What would you do? How would you do it? You can ask the LLM to say, well, can you generate a tweet, something which is 280 characters? Can you generate, you can use these as starting points, and that's the point, right? For doing this. This was fun for me because I didn't know exactly what it is that I would get as the output for it, but I'm constantly exploring ways that I can use LLMs to inspire the work that I do. And I had been thinking about Dubai chocolate and what made it special and what made it different. And so I thought it would be a really good idea to go about explaining to you how, if I were in a new product development capacity trying to create recipe ideas for Dubai chocolate adjacent products, this is how I would engage with an LLM to give me lots of interesting ideas, right? Don't rely on one, use several, fact check across multiple LLMs, use them as the source for inspiration, and then develop, as I did here. You'll notice that I developed a brief and a product strategy. What is the brief? What is the product strategy? What you might do as the third component of this, which is develop a marketing strategy. And a marketing strategy. And as a matter of fact, if I were to go over to Dia, what we'll do is we'll find that I asked it to develop. I'm not going to do this, right? But I got a product concept, I got a one pager. I've got a bunch of different ideas, but I talked about launch mechanics and all that other kind of stuff. I did a variation on this, and I asked it to do, I've got, I believe, here's a launch strategy. So I'm the owner of a small confectionery company. What can I do to take advantage of the Dubai chocolate craze without making Dubai chocolate? Spotlight middle instant ingredients, play up experiential, limited editions and scarcity, collaborations and crossovers, right? Educational content and tasting, social media, supply chain. I mean, it's given me a whole bunch of things that I can use to consider, right? When I put about doing this. I could ask it develop a costing spreadsheet. This is pretty cool. I mean, it may not be entirely accurate, but it gives me a place to start. And that's one of the things I think we're looking for, is we are looking for not necessarily the answer, but we're looking for inspirations. How can we go do? Here are the inspirations that, ChatGPT gave me when I ask questions. You'll notice that I'm not just relying on one. I'm using the fact that the browser that I'm using, Dia, has a feature called memory. And it's not just taking into account this one chat, the one chat that I'm currently in. What it's doing is, oh, it's remembering that I did another chat about the same topic, right? It has memory. It's bringing a more complicated, a more complex understanding of me and what it is that I'm looking for. And then, so it's really good. So a fromage frais, almond crunch, that's a pretty cool idea. I love that idea. Again, I shared the goat cheese, almond and feuilletine as a flavor. Again, ube and coconut, came from here. Caramelized egg custard, again. But I'm asking specifically, using caramelized egg custard as a replacement for pistachio paste, what would you recommend? I happen to have some freeze-dried whole egg powder here, and that's why I asked this question. I was in my refrigerator, I was looking at the jar, and I'm going, oh my gosh, that would be interesting. What would I do? If you're Brazilian, could I find a way to take the pão de queijo dough and get it, very, very thin, roll it out very, very thin, and get something which is very, very crispy, crunchy in a pão de queijo. If you're in Ecuador, pan de yuca, yeah, all right. So these are all the sorts of things that you can do and why LLMs are interesting. And with that, I want to say thank you to everyone who's been here this hour with me. I want to remind everybody that this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, is sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. You can go to the Chocolate Life, sign up for a free membership. There are also premium memberships, some of which include coaching and consulting services, if you'd like to take advantage of those. And what else do I have in the way of business? Oh, if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Do all the things, press the buttons, do all the things that are necessary. Follow me on Facebook at TheChocolateLife.com and the Chocolate Life, not .com, but the Chocolate Life on Facebook. And then you can also follow me on my personal account on LinkedIn. And with that, I click the right button. I'm doing this live, so there's room for mistakes, and I'm not editing them out. What I want to do is remind everybody, and I hope you really got a sense of this from this episode, that if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Until the next time, everybody, ciao.